Hey y'all, and welcome to this episode of the Muddling Through podcast. Today's guest is my friend William. He's a fellow podcast host, owner of the GeekKind network. So let's see, we talk about the weirdness that's online dating, talk about his personal philosophy, like the weird and strange political divide in the country, and talk about what it's like running a podcast network. So yeah, enjoy.
Not that I'm one who swears, but is this like PG-13?
I don't really have a limit on it.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had anyone on who cusses regularly yet. It's just been Alex and David.
Oh, David's been on?
Yeah. I just uploaded the episode. I think it was Tuesday.
Is your stuff on like distributed yet, other than just on Spreaker?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think I have it on Spotify. Just got iTunes, and I think it's on Castbox.
Yeah, because whenever you do a new podcast, it takes a little bit for it to get there, but once it's there, then the episodes get there really fast. Yeah. Like usually like in an hour or two. Mm-hmm. So, I just wanted to go ahead and subscribe to it. Oh. So, if it's on here yet, I'm not sure yet. Otherwise, I'll just find it later. But good to know.
Fair enough. Yeah, so thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah. It's kind of weird being on a podcast that I'm not, in charge of.
That you're not hosting.
But it's nice. I've done one other podcast before. I was a guest on 3.5 Geeks a little bit ago.
Okay.
Someone I connected with through like an app online. I forget the name of it, but it was like Tinder, but not for hookups, but for like making business connections.
Okay.
So yeah. A lot of things these days are being Tinderfied, if you will.
Yeah. Is that like I feel like Bumble had a version of that, like Bumble Business or something like that.
Really? I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, I might have that wrong. I might have that very wrong. But I think there's
you could be making this up.
Because Tinder has like groups, right?
Mm.
Like
groups? I don't know.
Is that right?
No.
What am I thinking of?
What are you thinking of?
I don't know.
I'm thinking like you have likes. Like, you can have stuff on your Tinder profile of, like, your interests and stuff like that.
Yeah, but I think you can swipe as, like, a group.
No, I have no idea what you're talking... Like, a group swipe? Like when you have a bunch of friends and you're looking for a bunch of girls?
I'd have to, like, actually look it up, but I'm pretty sure that's a thing. Like, you can... It might be Bumble.
Maybe. I don't know. I've only been on Bumble... once. Oh, I say that's kind of a weird thing to say. Yeah. I was on Bumble for like a few weeks.
For like a hot minute.
Yeah, well, it was all good until I got a date on there, and then we planned a date. The date was coming up, and then she decided that I gotta postpone it for whatever reason. Okay, fine. Yeah. As we're approaching the postponed date, she's like, "Look, I gotta be honest with you. I'm still not over my ex."
Yeah, that's what you want.
Yeah. So I was just like, when that kind of stuff happens, is like, okay, I'm kind of done with like dating apps for now. So, and that same thing happened, not with I'm not over my ex, but that same postponed date, and then basically canceling, and then also just not talking to me anymore. So it's like, I don't want to say ghosting, because it's not like we tried to meet up and she never showed up and then never responded, but it's like, we made a plan for a date and then just never did another one, and then just never talked to me again for like no reason. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that happened to me once on Bumble and twice on Tinder, and it was really disheartening.
I think your track record is better than mine.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh no.
It's real bad. Let's see, I've been on one date from a dating app. Like one person that actually got to the point where it's like, oh, let's go get drinks. Mm-hmm. Out of, like, I've probably spent, like, a grand total of, like, 6 months on dating apps. Like, okay. Broken up over periods.
That's fair. Yeah, because you always have, like, swings. You're never just, like, constant. I mean, I'm sure there people are, but, like, I've never been on Tinder all the time. I'd be on it for, like, a month or two, then be off it for a few months, and then back on it depending on whatever's going on.
Right. Yeah. So the one that I went on, it turns out that she was married and separated from her husband.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yeah.
So
let me get this straight. So she wasn't with her husband, but still legally married.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Still not great though.
Nope. So that was kind of wild. And I still figured it was worth like seeing if there was anything there, but then that just kind of fizzled out. Like she just didn't really seem interested. So aside from that, it's just, I don't know. Like I just don't get a lot of responses.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you know? I mean, it's weird because Tinder's gone through a really weird evolution over the years. Mm-hmm. And you weren't there for it, but back when I lived at the place that you did,
the bro house.
Yeah, the bro house. I don't want to give any specific locations or anything like that on the podcast, but yeah, at the place we deemed the bro house, there was one night where one of our friends was like joking around about trying to find someone and was just on Tinder for the heck of it. Mm-hmm. And he Chromecast it to the TV.
Oh, God.
So it became like a commentator sport. It's like, oh, no, sweat. Oh, no, sweat. We were all just laughing at it. And then after just having a night of that and literally having like 6 people around a TV telling our friend what to do and where to swipe, we decided like, oh, we should just all get like accounts just for the lulz. And we did it completely as a joke because we were totally mocking like during the entire time.
For sure.
And we all did that and it was all funny. And then, we're like, oh, haha, that's funny. Yeah, Tinder's like really like funny. It's only like for hookups. Cause that was the stigma back a few years ago, is that like, it was only for hookups and nobody took it seriously as someone that you could actually meet people on.
Mm-hmm. I think it might still be like, I think it's more that way now, but it's difficult. Yeah. Anyway.
But it's weird. So after that night, I'd say about half of us were like, ha ha ha, and then just kind of went away in private and just continued using the app. No, like, seriously.
Quietly install Tinder on your phones.
The reason why there's a lot of apps trying to do the same thing as like, how I said like it was being Tinderized, as, we like to say like Uber. Yeah. It's the Uber of this, it's the Uber of that.
Yeah.
Tinder has done that same kind of style with some of the apps that we see. Mm-hmm. And with Tinder, something that you realize when you go on there is that you realize that it's just an addictive way to use an app. Yeah. Those quick snap decisions and just looking through people quickly. Like it's not
there's a lot of like dopamine.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
there.
And then also like, I'm not gonna lie, half the time that I went back onto Tinder was to help my my self-confidence as far as dating goes, because I like to see that people still find me attractive and like want to date me, and that was a good way of like, hey, does anyone think I'm interesting? Okay, cool. I don't want to date anyone, but I mean, it's cool to know.
Like, I want that little ego boost.
Exactly. Yeah, sometimes you need that. So
I had the opposite experience.
Oh, no one wants to date me? That's cool. I'll never go on there again.
And then I'm back in 6 months.
But yeah, so it started out as that. When I did that, I actually did take it seriously. Did end up getting a girlfriend for a while because of it. Mm-hmm. We're no longer together, but we did meet through Tinder, and I kind of went on and off from it. But when I first got in, it was a lot of that same experience. Tinder had this aura of, it's only for hookups, because how can you find someone that's good for a relationship through this style of dating? Because it just seems so like barbaric.
Yeah, kind of like an artificial.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Because you're thinking when online dating started, we're looking at like eHarmony and Match.com, where it's like you look at profiles, you got all these details, the descriptions, these bios. So online dating was a very, you learn a lot about the person before you even talk to them.
Yeah.
And Tinder was the first one to do like a fast-paced version of online dating. Mm-hmm. And it seemed crazy. It's like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you judge someone just off of like a couple pictures and a really short, like Twitter-sized bio, Because back then they didn't have anything. They didn't have the music. They didn't have the Instagram like links. They just had your bio and your pictures. And that was all you had to go off of. And it was crazy to people that you couldn't talk to them unless if they, you matched back with them. Like you couldn't even send them like a, hey, or how's it going? Or like just to know that you didn't just like them, that you also wanted to talk to them. You couldn't do any of that. You had to wait for them to like you back. And it's not like they could even see your likes. You just have to hope that your profile comes up on their swipe session.
Yeah.
And that they would like it. So it's just really different. And I think that everybody had a similar experience to me, where it's like you were curious, you got on it, you think this is ridiculous. But then that dopamine thing of just constantly swiping got to you. And then before you knew it, you were like taking it seriously. It was like, what happened?
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, it started out as something that people made a joke of. People then started to take it seriously. In fact, I think Tinder single-handedly made online dating the mainstream way to get in contact with people other than meeting in person. Because I think that now, looking back, people that get in relationships now meet online and not in person.
Yeah.
No one's going to a bar to like meet with people as like the go-to thing anymore. Sure, that happens, but that's not the standard way of meeting people anymore.
It's like the stakes are lower.
Yeah.
In online dating, you don't have to talk to anybody unless they actually find you attractive.
Exactly.
Which is like, oh, you mean I don't have to approach people in public? Great.
Awesome.
Really hoping to avoid that.
And and then like the bars are not there for everybody. So like for all those other people that don't like going to bars, it kind of puts them in a weird situation as well. It's like, well, how do I, meet people?
Yeah. It's like me. Like I don't really drink, so going to a bar, it's like, oh well, I could order a soda, I guess.
Yeah. And then you got the situation where people don't go to bars alone; they go together in groups. So it's like you don't just go approach a girl; you approach a girl out of a group, and that's like extra intimidating. Right. But I think that Tinder was what pushed it over the edge to really make online dating the preferred way to find people, which has really done some bizarre things when it comes to dating in this like generation, where it's like, it seems, because even when you find someone in person that you find out that you're interested and you want to date, it's always followed up by online interaction. And then that's where you do the bulk of your interaction. And then that's when you find out more about someone. And sometimes you meet someone in person, you think they're cute or attractive or whatever. And then you go look them online, you find out more about them. And then you actually make your judgment based off of what you find about them online. Mm-hmm. So even if you meet them in person, it's not even getting over the hump of that online presence. Mm-hmm. So it's both good and bad. I think it definitely makes, one thing that I don't like about it is that I think that today people are really obsessed with labeling themselves. Okay. And there's definitely good things about it to be like included and find people that you have stuff in common with. Mm-hmm. But I think that a lot of people are starting to use labels as a quick means to prejudge people.
Gotcha.
Like, oh, so you're this, won't even consider it. So, pretty easy example would be say you're a Democrat or say you're a Republican and you see someone's on the other political side of you. Just based off of that thing alone, you could be like, nope, don't want to date a person. That's it. Just based off of that one label. Like, nope, ineligible.
Right.
So like, yes, I get the mentality behind that where you wouldn't want to date someone behind that. But what I find disappointing is that you didn't bother to talk to that person about it. Mm. And just says, I don't care what you have to say on this matter. I don't care where you are on that spectrum of like that political side. As soon as I see that you're on that political side, I don't care to even talk to you, and that's disappointing to me.
Like on the one hand, you would want to make the point that if you pick like a dividing line and it's like, you don't know how close to the line you are, you just like have, like you guys could be right next to each other.
Exactly.
With lines in between you, and you might have more in common than you think. On the other hand, if someone identifies as a Republican or a Democrat, they might be further to the extremes.
Right.
But that still doesn't mean that you can't have that you can't at least, have a meaningful, not even romantic relationship, but like you can chill. Like, you can get along with just about anybody for a decent amount of time.
I'm in a weird spot where I consider myself an independent. Mm-hmm. I think that actually having this two-party system is one of the biggest problems that we have in America politically. Yeah. I believe we're one of the only, if not the only country that does that. Most countries have multiple, like 3 or more political parties. And the dangerous thing about having two parties specifically, it doesn't matter what two parties you have. Only having two parties is dangerous because when you're looking at issues, when you have two parties, you start painting answers as yes or no, or good versus evil, or black versus white, and just all these things. And and you start to really take away from conversation about there being more options. Yeah. Everything is a hard yes or a hard no. And it's causing people to be very polarized and things like that. Like I mentioned with the prejudging and just seeing like as soon as you see someone being on the opposite end of you, you may immediately think that this person is the opposite person to you, you know, and you don't have anything in common just because of that one attribute. Mm-hmm. But I think that for a while I was very interested in the Libertarian Party, and I believe they're still the biggest third party out there, and they have started getting traction, getting ballots in New Hampshire. They actually had for the recent elections for 2018, not for the presidential, but for like the House and Senate and all that. Yeah. I forget what you call that, but midterm elections. That's the one. Yeah, so New Hampshire actually had a libertarian ballot, which I thought was great. Oh, okay. And more recently, I haven't been as fond of the Libertarian Party. A lot of their stuff is based off of like freedom of government. But like, I was like, I like that idea because I mean, that's also like kind of a Republican idea. Because the whole point of Libertarian is taking the best of both parties. But I've been finding that they're a little bit almost too crazy with having their rights, where it's like these people, you know, the whole like don't tread on me like thing. Like imagine that, like amplify and turn it into a political party, and just like they want nothing to do with government. They want everything. And I think one of the things that really drew the line for me, and I appreciate them being consistent, but that's when I decided, you know what? I think I'm done associating myself with you guys.
Just a bridge too far.
Yeah, well, because they said that basically we don't want anyone telling us how to live our lives. I'm like, okay, that's fair, but I think there is certain points where the government needs to step in and get involved. The specific issue for me was with vaccines. Okay. The Libertarian Party has a very different view on vaccines. We're saying that we recommend you should get vaccines, but they're saying that they should not require anyone to have vaccines whatsoever, making kind of a confusing line where it's like, we're going to tell you to have vaccines, but we're going to tell you that you're totally allowed to not have vaccines, and we're not going to criticize you for that. So it's kind of like a double standard. And I understand why they're doing it, because they don't want the government telling them that they have to do something. Yeah. So I appreciate the consistency. But then but then I realized that, you know, I'm not someone who doesn't want any government. Government is important. They do certain things, you know. I think one of the general things about, you know, Republican versus Democrat is that Republican wants less government and Democrat wants more. And there's a lot of... Theoretically. And I think that kind of just goes more on their policies and what they're looking for. You know, with more government, you have different pros and cons. You know, you got more services that the government can offer and all the things that they can do for you. They can help you out more, but then also that comes at a price, you know?
Right. And they don't necessarily do it better. Like, redistribution of wealth is basically the government's... redistribution of wealth and monopoly on force are like the government's two... Like, that's the thing that it does. Yeah. And as far as redistribution of wealth goes, it doesn't necessarily do it better than, say, a nonprofit organization. It might, but, like, government does things badly. Yeah. Like, that's just kind of how it goes. It's like, do you really want to rely on the government to, you know, be in charge of, like, where your money goes? Right. Maybe not.
So one of my biggest disagreements about the Democrat side of things is basically trusting the government and then all the government sanctioned bodies with everything. You know, there's a big reason why we have things like the Second Amendment, which is more than just rights for guns. Yeah. But it's basically, you know, the right to tell the government that they're messing up when they're messing up, you know? Okay.
And that's not like a First Amendment.
First Amendment, Second Amendment, a lot of things about our amendments are protecting us from basically what happened to with America and England in the first place, which is basically they had a lot of beef with the government, and not only were they not allowed to tell them that they were doing all these things wrong, but they got punished for it. Yeah. And they're like, when we make this new country, we're going to make sure that we allow space for people to criticize us without being punished, you know? And I think that Democrats put a lot more faith in the government, where I want like a baseline trust with the government. I think that they're definitely something that should help us out, but I feel like the heavy lifting should be done by the person and not the government.
And even, like, it should be less federal and more state.
Yeah.
Like it should, like, the ultimate responsibility should fall on the individual, and slightly more responsibility, like, the further you go up the chain, and, like, the least amount of responsibility for people at the top end.
Mm-hmm.
Like, right? So, like, the country as a whole, you kind of have to, make good decisions in that regard, and you have to deal with foreign policy. But, like, as far as the individual goes, the federal government shouldn't have anything to do with what the individual's doing, but, like, more about, like, what the states are doing.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Overall, right now, I'm not really associating myself with any party. I just consider myself independent. I like ideas from both spectrums.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other things I didn't really mention, but I'll just throw out there real quick, is that Democrats are a lot more focused on social issues than Republicans. Republicans are not focused on that at all. However, Republicans are much more focused on things like military and foreign relations than the Democrats are. So I think that both of those things shouldn't be ignored.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like one of them focuses too hard on each of those issues. There's a balance that needs to be made, and I understand priority of issues, but I feel like ultimately those things should all be important. And it seems like you make decisions that hurts one side or the other. So we were looking at, like, a lot of people's complaints about Trump is that we're falling behind on the social policies. But Republicans will say, ignore that. Look at how we're doing economically, So, and I would agree, there's different pros and different cons, but basically me being an independent, I see that, like, look, I think that nobody's completely wrong, but I also don't think anyone's completely right here, and not just like 90% right and 10% wrong. Like, I think it's basically half and half here, and I wish that people would actually be more open to not being so loyal to either side, because I think that, especially, again, the danger of having only two parties is that you become very closed-minded when it comes to things from the other spectrum.
Very tribal.
Yeah, and yeah. So I one of the things that I like about I'm just gonna be independent for the time being, because I'm trying to hold a standard for myself that I'm being open to ideas from anybody.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna, like, as soon as I hear your party, I'm not going to be, like, overly critical or automatically having some sort of bias that, nope, I'm already going to disagree with what you're going to have, but sure, I'll let you talk before I can talk, No, I want to hear what you have to say. I'd like to hear your perspective on things. And honestly, I wish, even though this will never happen, I wish people would stop associating themselves with parties. I wish people would just automatically say that they're independent. Even better, maybe just not have parties in general, just have candidates.
Yeah.
I like this candidate's ideas for this and this and reason. Sure, the parties make it easier to categorize, but I think that what we have right now is probably the worst. I think that it would be better to have no parties, and I think it would be better to have more parties. But to have two parties is honestly the worst possible combination of anything.
Yeah, I think people just want things that are simple and easy.
Yeah, this is true.
And, like, I have this problem myself where I don't want to think, like, I don't really want to think through and, like, do my research and, like, have an informed opinion about things. I just want to have, like, a gut reaction and, spout off some opinion about a thing that I don't really know anything about. And I can't imagine I'm alone in that.
Yeah.
And so people just want, like, simple, easy solutions, and then they toe the party line, they spout the party dogma. And the weird thing is that, like, a lot of the stuff shifts around, and it all depends on who's saying it. Mm-hmm. So, like, something that people would be in favor of, 5 or 10 years ago, they're against because now it's the other side's position.
Yeah.
Which is pretty wild. Like, when someone points that out, they're like, yeah, so this candidate, used to believe this, or, this was their stance on this issue, and now it's completely the other side, and you're like, well, I guess I can't bring that up because, like, it's not going to matter.
Yeah, it's crazy the differences, especially if you look at stuff from, like, 30 years ago. I think that's usually a good point to look at from where parties as a whole have flip-flopped on issues for better and worse, What I think is important is that people like to point out inconsistencies in candidates going back, like, 10, 20 years. But I'm like, even the parties themselves are changing, Yeah. And I think what's what I hate seeing is just people being ignorant about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, again, that comes just with the blind loyalty.
Right.
You know, so I'd wish people were more open to ideas as a whole from both parties. I think that both parties suck at this. I think both parties are fairly ignorant and just really biased on their own opinions. I don't think that either party's better or worse at that. I think we're all at fault here.
Mm-hmm. You need some sort of balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think it's just having that two-party system is just really toxic for opposing ideas, you know?
And it might not even be just that it's the two parties. It's more that we have two parties and they're not talking to each other.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Or like they're yelling at each other and neither is listening. They're just both yelling at each other.
So like if we had two parties that communicated and compromised, we'd probably be in a pretty good position. But because it's just about, you know, winning points for their side. And I think, you know, the people in the government are partially responsible for this, but the people that elected them are also responsible because if someone is seen in the party to like be friendly with people on the opposite side, they're not going to get reelected because they're seen as a traitor. So like it has to, like it goes both ways. Like we would like things to get done and have things, you know, go well, but we're not willing to compromise as quote unquote civilians, even though elected officials are civilians typically. But like if we can't talk to each other and like reach some sort of compromise in terms of like what we're willing to like, I don't know, like reach some sort of middle ground. Like if we can't do it, then we can't expect our politicians to either.
Especially when it comes to issues like say climate change, whether you disagree on, and I'm very adamant about the point that I think that everybody can agree that there's some variant of climate control happening. I think that you'd be very ignorant to say that nothing is happening. Yeah. I think that some people like to play it down and some people like to play it up.
Yeah.
So regardless of where you feel about that, I honestly am not very critical of people who are around the spectrum of that. I only become critical if you're just not on that at all.
Yeah.
So that's an issue that affects everybody. Right. And there's other issues as well. Let's say freedom of speech. I think that these are issues. There's issues that drastically affect everybody, and those issues especially is stuff that we should come together on and really have open conversations about. And it's interesting because this has been a very slow build, and it's kind of like the good and bad of like having the internet available to us. You know, I think that we're both the most educated and while also in the same time being the most ignorant to education, you know? And I think that one thing that needs to change is that people are not okay with being wrong. Everyone wants to be right about everything. I get it. That's totally natural. But I think that nobody ever wants to admit that they're wrong or they could even possibly be wrong. How many times have you seen an argument online and someone said, you know what, I'm wrong? I've seen it 0 times.
Yeah.
So
can't say that I've seen it.
Yeah. And not even about like, forget politics, like say like gaming issues, like someone saying like PlayStation versus Xbox. You don't ever get people to agree with even the stupid stuff. People want to be right about everything. And more so than that, people are basically being told that you have to have an opinion about everything. And those are two dangerous things to combine with each other, because then you have people who are uneducated about something, but then telling them that you have to have a yes or no answer, regardless if they know a freaking fact, a single fact about this topic. It doesn't even matter. It seems like people are more inclined to say that having an opinion is more important than knowing anything about that opinion.
Right.
You know, people want you to have answers. People don't like it when you say, you know what, I don't know. And I think that people should be not only just more okay with that, but people should also be more confident in saying it's okay to say you don't know.
Yeah.
If you got an issue that you only know a few facts about and just a few experiences about, and you're just still undecided, don't feel like you have to say yes or no. Don't feel like you have a really big, like mini speech to say about it or something like that, why you think it's right or wrong or whatever the issue is. People are just too inclined just to come up with something out of nothing, you know, and it's so stupid, and it's so counterproductive to any conversation that we can have, you know?
Right. And when you don't have a fully formed opinion on something, you have to fall back on the tropes, like the talking points that you've heard, whether or not you like fully agree with them. You're like, oh, well, I don't have an opinion. Yeah. So I'm just gonna like, this is the side that I more or less fall on. So I'm just gonna like present these, talking points as my own facts. I
would encourage people, if you are well educated about a certain point, or you have a firm standing on a certain issue, go into the other people's backyard. Figure out how they think, why they think they weigh it. Don't be intimidated by it. Don't be scared. Don't be closed-minded as soon as you hear that someone else has a different opinion than you, because I feel like if you are scared of people who have an opposite opinion of you, that only makes your opinion significantly more weak. If you don't want to have a conversation about the other side, then that means you honestly are not very confident about your own opinion.
Right.
Because you should be able to learn everything there is about both sides and then come to a conclusion. That's how real opinions should be made. Not learning a lot about one side. Well, I know a lot about this side, and they've explained it to me in a way that makes sense. Therefore, everything else makes no sense. And my way or the highway. You know?
And all of my arguments are formulated on the worst possible version of, like, as a rebuttal to the worst possible version of their argument. Like, rather than figuring out, like, what's the best possible version of their argument, and does my position stand against that? Like, if their best argument, doesn't manage to, like, looking at it honestly, like, if their best argument doesn't poke holes in mine, like, then you can be confident that you're in the right.
But what I hate is conversations, quote unquote conversations, that are really just waiting. And like, there's a difference between hearing and listening. When you're hearing them, you're just basically waiting for the moment when you're properly allowed to speak. They finish their point, you're allowed to add a rebuttal. But a lot of people who hear and not listen are not actually looking for an engaging conversation. They have basically a script of points that they're looking to say. And as soon as they hear basically, oh, you brought this one fact or one graph, as soon as they hear that, they're like, I've got the preloaded rebuttal for that. And they don't care about anything else you say around that. They only care about that. If you actually care about what you're talking about and care about finding the right solution to whatever problem you have, you should listen to every single person's opinion, even if it comes from the same place. You know, just because you actually wholeheartedly listen to someone who is politically opposite to you, and you feel like you did a good job with that person, and you listened to them, you heard their topics, and you had an engaging conversation, that's still not enough, because not everybody on that side thinks the same way. You've got to always have that mentality. It's never about just that one conversation or that one person representing that side. You need to, like, when I have conversations with the goal of informing and like learning more about your own opinions, every conversation brings something new. Even if it's something that you completely disagree with, and you disagree with literally every single word that they said, even if you were wholeheartedly listened to, you now know how that person thinks, why that person thinks. You understand how they got to these conclusions. Even if they're wrong, you can understand the thought process. And then that only makes your position make more sense to yourself, because now you've been more educated about things that are against yours. Right. And that only really influences it. Because I think that's the funny thing, is that people are so scared to find and really wholeheartedly listen and consider other people's opinions, when really, if you are really listening to it and you really do believe what you do believe, then that's only going to make your opinions more stronger. It's not going to weaken you. It's not going to make you like fall apart in your arguments. And I feel like that's what a lot of people fear, is that they're going to hear other things and they're going to fall apart and they're not going to feel as confident. But even if, like, here's the crazy thing, is that if you have a conversation and you've got a main point and you've got some answers, but not all answers, that's also okay. Just be honest about what answers you do know and what answers you don't. And own up to it, because that's going to provide a much more productive conversation. And if you're having an actual conversation and an argument, when you bring up something is like, honestly, I don't know the number. I don't know the fact. I don't know where I got this source. Be honest about that, and they will respect you a lot more for that. Mm-hmm. Don't say up some nonsense. Don't act like they're stupid for not knowing where you got your source from. They're not you, okay? Like, you can't expect them to think the same way as you.
And you can't expect everyone to have access, or you can't expect everyone to have encountered all the information that you've encountered along the way.
Yeah. I'm a full-time Lyft driver, and I talk to people all the time. Mm-hmm. And it's very different than retail. You know, retail, I was a cashier for a while, then also just working on the floor for quite a few years. And those interactions was much smaller and much more object-oriented. Mm-hmm. You know, cashiers was a little bit more flexible with that because you're just doing your thing and they're just kind of waiting. So you have an opportunity for some free-flowing conversation. If you're on the floor, it's like, where's this? What's that? No one's going to come up to you on the floor and being like, hey, well, like, how's your day going? Like, that's not the conversation that you have.
Yeah. And when it does, you're just like who are you?
Yeah.
What are you doing here?
Exactly. But with cashiering, usually it's short experiences. You can never get, it's very, very surface level chit chat, you know. With Lyft driving, you're doing a very mundane task being driving. And usually rides are like 10 minutes or more. You know, that's a much more substantial time for conversation. Even a long checkout process at tops is going to be like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, so, and very frequently I'll have rides a half an hour to 60 minutes. You know, I usually get one of those or like 1 to 3 of those a night, mm-hmm. you know, in my span of like 6 hours of driving. So, as long as a person is willing to talk, you have a lot more opportunities for some more in-depth conversations.
Yeah.
And so I get to hear a lot of people's opinions and thought process, and I love learning about people and how they function and more about their culture. If there's someone from outside the country or even outside the state, you know, mm-hmm. someone from the West Coast is going to be someone very different than on the East Coast. Right. What their lifestyle's like, what they do for a job. There's so many things you can learn about people as a whole that can just give value to yourself. You know, I see every conversation as a opportunity, mm-hmm. you know, and something that I can learn for myself, you know, like I said earlier, like even if you talk to someone and you disagree with literally everything they said, you still learn something from it. You have nothing but stuff to gain by having a conversation with someone, mm-hmm. you know? Sometimes I'll have really funny talks and sometimes I'll have really deep conversations. Sometimes we'll have very deep conversations about stuff we completely agree on. And sometimes I've had conversations where we really disagree with stuff and it'll become borderline heated.
Yeah.
But I always keep it very chill and I try to keep it very respectful. You know, whenever I have something, whenever someone says something and I disagree with it, I try to be very calm-headed because nobody gains anything from being heated and being riled up, and like that's how you go from a conversation just to a point where you're just arguing and then nothing productive is happening.
Yeah, practice some detachment.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Give your ego a check and try to figure out like how to move forward.
The way that I see how people work, right, is that when you're born, you're not born with opinions. You're born on like a blank slate, you know. The first thing that's going to influence you is your family and your parents and just your overall surroundings. That's how it's going to start. And that's your starting point after that. But when we're all born with a blank slate. So the way that I see people in conversations is that imagine like the root of a tree, right? It's all from the center point and then all just kind of branches out really wide. So when I see people and their opinions and ideals, I don't see someone who's way far away from me on who they are as a person as someone who's crazy. Like, I don't think crazy people exist. I think that people have made wrong conclusions for things that's happened in their life and stuff that's going on around them to have very different opinions and ideals or morality or whatever have you. Mm. But I don't think they're crazy for that because I think that everybody started from the same point and there's a reason that they are at the point that they are.
Yeah.
Sure, you've got some other outside factors. So if you have like a mental illness or something like that, like if you're actually psychotic, that's going to influence it. But when it comes down to it, your normal person is going to come from somewhere where you both relate, you know, because when you follow those roots up, there's going to be a point where you were more or less the same, mm-hmm. you know, and then there was a point where all of a sudden you were really close and now you're really far because now you've gone in different directions.
Yeah.
So rather than looking at them as a whole person in that thing, I kind of take that for topics, right? So you have an issue. You break down the issue into parts, right? And you find out, okay, you get to the issue down to, rather than the end part of it, then down to its source. Like, okay, so what part of this issue do we disagree on? And what was the point that caused us to separate, where there was a single thing that made us think differently. And then once that's identified, that has all the other details and clauses. So for instance, if you're trying to decide if you're a conservative or liberal, it could be the argument about government. Mm-hmm. And you decide that, I'm only thinking differently than you because I think more government is good. It's like, well, I only have a beef with that because I think more government is bad. Like, there's your source right there, So then rather argue all the other nuances about government, argue about why you think more or less is good and bad. Mm-hmm. That's where change happens. Not in the details, not in the outcomes, but why you got to that point in the first place, because that's where you're also going to find the most in common, and that's where the most productive conversations can happen. So I think that people are way too quick to judge people based off of labels and just thinking that, wow, you disagree with me, I don't have any hope into talking with you, because I like to, when I talk to someone about something, I like to back them up. It's like they make a crazy claim that I can't even come to terms with agreeing with. Mm-hmm. But I don't just see that and think that, wow, I'm not going to have any conversation with you. I don't even want to talk to you. But if I see someone make a crazy claim, it's interesting to me. I was like, okay, let's back it up. How did you get to this decision? Okay, it was from this experience. Okay, it was from this decision. And then follow that back until it's something that I can understand, mm-hmm.
Because odds are that, if they have, a really kind of out there opinion, they probably know that it's out there, and
right.
they're prepared to explain why they think what they think.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, a good example was my first girlfriend. I'm kind of tying it back to the first thing we talked about. My first girlfriend, we dated for 3 years, mm-hmm. and it was in high school. After 3 years, we were... I was 18 and she was 17. And, after 3 years, it's only natural to think about marriage and things like that. Where's this going? We were talking about what married life would look like, and more importantly, family. Because family is something that's very important to me. Mm-hmm. And having kids is something that's important to me. And, all the things along with that is important. So we were talking about how we would go about raising our kids mm-hmm. and stuff like that. Because I was trying to figure out whether I wanted to actually propose to her and all these things. And I started to get some more hard-hitting questions, we've talked about deep stuff before, but some really specific questions about what would, not even trying to hide the fact that we're thinking about marriage. And it's kind of obvious at this point. So I'm just going hey, if we have kids, what is this going to look like? How are we going to bring them up? How are we going to school them? How are we going to treat all these issues and all these things? Because these are important to me,
You want to be on the same page.
Yeah. Because the thing is that I'm a very chill and agreeable person when it comes to people, so I can get along with a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So the married life aspect is something that I could adapt to, whatever it may be. But bringing up kids is something that's a bit more specific in how I see that should happen. Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about that, I realized that it was something that we were drastically had different feelings about. Mm-hmm. Not about having kids. We both wanted kids, but how we raised them. And through talking, I found, even though I really disagreed with her and she was making some points that made absolutely no sense to me, after talking for a while, I realized that, I come from a family, I have a lot of siblings and pretty close family as well. We all have good relations. No one hates each other. There was no falling out. There was no divorces or anything like that. Her family, her mom's been divorced and remarried 5 times. And she doesn't have the best relations with her mother or father. They both have different issues. She doesn't have the best relations with her siblings, on and off kind of stuff, and I think I remember her saying to me one time that she just has, she doesn't have a lot of faith in family. Mm-hmm. She doesn't see it as that important, that big of a deal. And for me, that's totally different. Family is everything to me. It's very important. It's a big part of who I am today, and I still interact a lot with my family. I'm very close with them, and it's very important to me. And I see a lot of value in family, and I'm very saddened by people who don't have a loving and supporting family, because I think that makes a big difference as a person. So based off of her experiences, it was very logical for her to have the thoughts about raising a child that she did. And for me, the same. But the thing is that we had very different experiences growing up, that both opinions were validated by our experiences. And so and these are things that were for our entire lifetimes. These aren't things that are easy to change. This is how we were brought up. This is how we observe family. And those things, that's the kind of thing that's not changed very easily by a conversation.
Right.
You know?
They're kind of foundational.
Exactly. So I kind of realized that she's not like crazy for thinking that way she does. She's just come from a very, very different background than myself. And I don't blame her for thinking the way that she does. But when it came down to it, after realizing that's not something that's going to change, and something that was just so vastly different, that having kids and bring them up together was going to be very, very problematic, because I don't want to have two parents who have two different ways of bringing up a child, you know? So, because for me, like, I don't want, like, I'm very serious about marriage, and I don't view divorce as an option. Obviously, like, it is an option, but I want to do everything I can to avoid that and fight for it. And then basically do all the work beforehand. This is why I'm talking about kids before we even engage. You know, that's important to me. But yeah, I had that conversation. I didn't think she was crazy or a worse person for it. I understood where she was coming from, and I wasn't like upset with her for it. I was disappointed for sure, you know, because I wanted things to work out. And after identifying that, I realized that it wasn't. But that only came from me talking to her a lot, listening to her a lot, and having her explain why she thinks the way she does, and not just the points that she brought up to me, you know, because I could argue those all the time, and none of those would budge. And if I never asked why she thinks it the way she does, I would never figure out why she wasn't budging on those things. So life experiences is very important. It's one of the biggest things that causes us to think that the way they do. So I try not to judge people based off of their outcome, opinions, and decisions, because usually the sources can be very sensitive and very life experienced. And those are a bit harder to change, and there's a reason why they're not just brought up with the opinions that we have. You know, you could have someone who is, like, you know, if you're saying that, you know, I'm trying to figure out like how not to be too sensitive with this, but like, say you have someone who, like, you got a friend or someone who had a really bad deal with, like, say, domestic abuse or something like that. You know, you would have a lot more opinions, a lot more facts, and a lot more vigor with those types of outcomes and opinions about that kind of topic, and you would have a lot more drive to fight for it, and most importantly, a lot more concrete ideas about it. And someone who doesn't have any personal experiences can come at it from a completely different angle.
Right.
So I try to be very respectful when someone has especially a very personal, you know, thing about a certain opinion. And I think that people are too quick to assume that there isn't any, or sometimes people get really stuck up and they find that out down the line, but they still don't apologize for their actions, you know. But, you know, there's just a lot of things that you don't know about people, and I think that you're more of an asshole if you're the one who doesn't care to find out, you know. Sure, it's like they're the ones that has to bring it up to tell you, but if you're not looking for it, then I think that ends up being yourself at fault, not the person for not telling you, you know. Because if all you care about is criticizing them for the end results of their life experiences and decision making, then you're not going to get anywhere, and you're really doing them a disservice in how a conversation and actual change with conversation happens. You know? I
think it's a mutual responsibility.
Yeah.
It's up to you to find out. It's up to you to build relationships with the people that you're around, and to figure out like what makes them tick. But it's also up to those people to establish boundaries. Like healthy boundaries, obviously. Like, you don't want to be unreasonable. But if something that you do bothers them, you might not pick up on it. They might not let on. And if they don't let on and you just keep doing it, like, you're hurting them, but you may not be able to tell.
Right.
And so if they don't say anything, then it's just going to keep going. Does that kind of...
Yeah. No, I was just thinking about it this way, right? Say you go to someone's house and you want to go in the house. You decide to stand in front of the door and not knock or ring the doorbell. You decide to do nothing but stand in front of the house. You then go home, complain to your friend that they didn't let you in. Mm-hmm. But you gave no indication that you were present.
Right.
Or requested any sort of access into their house. You're at fault for that. If you knock at the door, ring the doorbell, ask them, hey, I'm here, can you let me in? Mm-hmm. And they ignore that and don't then they're at fault. But basically, if you're someone who doesn't care to investigate, then I see that you're at fault. So, it's just like that. You have to have that. Like, I don't feel like people should be expected to bring up their life story about opinions. Mm-hmm. I feel like those things should only come up when comfortable. But then also, if you're not looking for it, then of course it's never come up. You shouldn't be surprised if it doesn't come up. Mm-hmm. That's like, for instance, if you're standing at the door and the person just happened to see you outside the window and like, hello, sure.
What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. But you can't expect just to stand there and expect them to open up the door if you've never even tried to open it. Mm-hmm. That's just stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So is that something that, that you really carried into GeekKind?
Well, people in general is something that's really important to me. And for those who don't know, GeekKind is the company that I run, and it's like a pop culture censored media company. But something bigger than that down the road is building a community. Mm-hmm. I'm a pretty big nerd and geek when it comes to stuff, and I found a lot of people that I enjoy being with in pop culture communities. I've played a lot of sports, but I didn't have a lot of stuff in common with people who are all about sports. Mm-hmm. And whatever other communities that I had around me, I like cars, but I'm not a gearhead. Mm-hmm. I found that one of the things was fun. I really liked fan theories and learning about how other people thought about the shows or what could happen. The biggest one for me was Doctor Who. That was the one that got me started, and that was that's a good one for fan theories. There's a lot of things that can happen. It's a big show about calling back to itself, so you're constantly trying to figure out how everything intertwines and how it could go. So I would love talking to my friends about that show and about what could happen, and from that it ended up leading me into cosplaying. And with cosplaying, I think cosplay is the ground level of your nerds and geeks, because you're putting your own personal identity aside for the sake of your enjoyment of a specific character. Mm-hmm. You don't care what you look like, you don't care what you act like. What you think is the most important at that time is that you show your support so much of this character that you would like to momentarily be this character. Mm. I think that's more devoted of a fan than you can ever be, Yeah. And you'll find your most hardcore nerds and geeks in there, I feel like, especially when the amount of money and effort and time that people put into cosplays. It's insane.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah. So I made a lot of friends through cosplay. And cosplay is a really great community when it comes to bonds and respecting others. And just a very diverse community, and I found a lot of friends from there. I had a falling out with a good amount of my friends right before cosplay. And I was kind of in a weird spot where I was in a very transitional period of my life as a whole, but also especially with my social life. Mm-hmm. And cosplay just randomly came into the picture. And I immediately started making friends in there. And they were completely different people than I had known that grew up around me. And people who, and I'm not talking about people who just had the same likes as me. Mm. These are people that were much more understanding, much more respectful, and people who just saw, people specifically on a spectrum closer to mine. And that just really valued real human connection and even valued respecting people that you have no connections with, and, I disagree with a lot of things with my friends, politics, religion, there's lots of things, but all those things are okay because we care about each other's opinions and we respect each other as people. And it's crazy how these people respect me more for having vastly different thoughts and processes than the people that I did have in common with. Mm-hmm. They respected me very different, ironically. I'm not saying this is how it goes for everybody, but it's crazy how I only found that with people who were on the other side of the spectrum for me. Right. And that meant a lot to me because it meant that they looked past all that, and I mean, I did the same thing. I'm not trying to say this is one I wrote, but I'm more talking about my friends because I'd rather bump them up and talk about how good I am.
Sure.
But anyway, so I got into this and I saw this amazing community and just a lot of the points that was being pushed forward is just very awesome to see and that you don't really see in other communities. And something that after I started really getting set in stone in there, it's had a very increase of toxicity and drama and things that I went here to avoid. One of the bigger things is that being a nerd or a geek was a big escape for all these people who wanted to like these things, or basically wanted to find their own home away from all the other people, and they found like-minded people that cared less about who they were as a person and more just about, hey, we like the same thing. Let's make that the forefront of our friendship, and it was a way to get away from the bullies, the drama, the toxicity, and now what's interesting is that geek culture is becoming so mainstream that we're seeing those people who criticized it now joining it because now it's mainstream and now it's the cool thing to do. We were okay with it not being cool because it mean it avoided those people. But now it's been elevated from that ground and now it's what everyone's talking about. Marvel's like the biggest anything in film right now,
right?
And now everybody wants a part of it. And unfortunately, that also means those people that we tried to avoid in the first place. And I am talking about a minority here, but unfortunately about that minority is that it's a very loud minority. So I don't want it to make it seem like I'm criticizing people who aren't geeks or nerds and stuff like that. You guys are fine too. But the people that went to these communities in the first place was to avoid those small groups that were doing a lot of damage. So it was disheartening for me to see this, to come right before this curve and seeing all this stuff. Like, I found my place. I found this community. I love these people that are around me. And then right as I got my foot set in there, then I see a path where this could all be gone, and rather than, I'm seeing a lot of people who have been in these communities for decades and they're giving up. They're leaving. They're going into their small circles of friends and not engaging with the community as a whole. They've got their 5 or 6 friends that they like. Say you have a D&D group. They got your D&D group. And that's all they care about. They don't care about the D&D community. They don't care about everything else that's going on. They just care about their small circle of friends because they know and trust them. And that's all that matters to them at that point. They don't care about trying to engage with new people. They don't try to engage to contribute to the community as a whole, because it's not worth it to them, because what they're trying to avoid is now come back to haunt them. And I don't see a lot of people doing anything about it, unfortunately. Everyone's complaining about it, but I'm not seeing a lot of action. And that's something that personally bugs me as a person.
Sure.
So I was like, what can I do? Other than just being the person that I want to see in other people. I don't want to just talk about it. I want to do it. So that's the first step, is be the person that you want to see in other people, But then beyond that, it's like, okay, how can I make a bigger influence on the community as a whole? How can I contribute? What can I do? And I figured that, okay, what if one of the things I was seeing is that in a lot of the communities, like say online, a lot of them, that was a good source for a lot of the toxicity. A lot less of it was happening in person. And I was like, trying to figure out, where's the best place to go for people to meet for this kind of thing? And what I came to was that there really wasn't. There was better places, but not a lot of people, not a lot of places did a good job of dealing with those types of people that were basically looking just to tear down other people for their own sake of enjoyment, I guess, or whatever makes them feel better at the end of the day. And I was like, on top of that, there was also the side of things where I've got a lot of younger siblings, and they don't have a place to go where they can not only avoid that, but just a lot of adult content as well.
Right.
Not even just swearing, but a lot of sexual references, you know? And I was like, I want to bring them to places, but then I have the complications of them not being child appropriate and them not being just very healthy anymore, you know? I'm a grown adult. I can deal with that stuff a lot better, but they're still young, impressionable kids. They're going to have a harder time dealing with that, you know? I've been there. I know how it works. So I was like, there needs to be a place that does justice to all these groups. And so the end goal for GeekKind is to create these content. It's not like making it family friendly. It's making it family accessible. Mm-hmm. So we don't do things like swearing or bringing up a lot of vulgar content. So that way kids can partake in it. We're not trying to cater to them because kids don't like kid cater content. They want the same content that adults are getting. And we're not trying to make kid content, you know? The kids want to watch the R-rated stuff. They want to watch the cool, edgy things that the adults are watching. And I think that there's a way to still provide them that in a way that's safe, you know? So we're not looking to make kid content, but we don't want to exclude them from our content. So that's how we're approaching that side of it. But on the other side, we realized that it's not going to be like, this site is for people who aren't toxic and who don't like drama and yada, 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 and just expect everything to go well. That's not how the world works. That's certainly not how the internet works. No. I'm afraid that if we talk about it too much, then that's just going to encourage people to troll even more. Yeah. But that being said, the goal is not to eliminate it. The goal is to, rather than denounce that side of people, to not only do that, but to encourage the good side of people. Because I feel like you've got a lot of people who will criticize the people who are doing bad things, but then you're not giving a lot of hope to people. Mm-hmm. You know, you're only bringing down the people who deserve it or whatever means you feel, and not giving a lot of encouragement or boost to the people who are doing the right things. Mm-hmm. So we want to promote the people who are doing the right things, and we want to ignore the people that are not contributing in healthy ways.
So like positive reinforcement?
Exactly. So we're not looking to be a place that has none of that. That's going to be impossible. Literally, it's going to be impossible. But we want to a place that cares so less about that and only cares about promoting the best things in the community that eventually people just see it as like a futile venture, you know? So there's a very minimal amount of that type of stuff. So yeah, right now we have a lot of podcasts up. We have Coscast, which is a cosplay focused podcast. We have Inconceivable, which is like a good like fan theory and just general opinionated conversations about pop culture as a whole, whether it be movies, TV show, video games, anime, all that jazz. And we got other shows talking about more nuanced things coming up in the future. We want to do some more gaming content. We would love to do some more video related shows. Podcasts is a good way to start because it's a lot lower maintenance, a lot lower production. We're still a small team and we're working on things, but we're definitely getting there. And but yeah, the whole company means a lot to me. And like people ask me what my dream job or my end goal is, like this is it right here. Like this is what I want to be doing, because not only does it involve a lot of things I enjoy being pop culture, but I also am a graphic designer, videographer, so it does that. But it's got a mission that's very important to me, and that's protecting a community that's helped me so much, find lifelong friends and really make me feel confident in the person that I am today, you know, and not feeling like I'm doing something wrong by basically just my personality, my likes or my looks or all that stuff. You know, it's the cosplay and pop culture community as a whole is a very open-minded community. And like I was just talking about, all these, you know, things about listening to people and understanding their backstories and where they're coming from. This is a group that's more open and ready to do those types of actions. You know, there's a far less sizable group of people who are ignorant in this group. Obviously they exist, obviously. But I feel like the issues that we are dealing within, say, the cosplay community are a lot more minor than I would have to deal with people outside of that day to day. And again, I'm not trying to criticize people who aren't a part of that community. I'm not trying to say that we're better than you. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying that I feel like they're doing a lot of things right. And unfortunately, they're going to one of the hardest, if not the hardest, evolutions of the community. And I think that it's important to take action now. And that's what I'm hoping to do.
Yeah.
So,
all right. How successful do you feel like you've been?
I mean, the weird thing about starting content and businesses in general is that like your first like 0.5%, like not 0.5%, like the first like chunk of your company is going to be the slowest. And it's like, you look at it like a ski slope, you know, it's going to be so slow starting out. And if you say you take 1 and you double it, you got 2. You take 2, you double it, you got 4. You take 4, you double it, you get to 8. You've had to double it 4 times. You haven't even gotten to double digits yet. Mm-hmm. But if you take like 1,000 and you double it, 2,000, and then like if you work with all these numbers and is you double it more and more, the increase rate becomes much more significant. Mm-hmm. You know, exponential. Yeah. Everything that's happened so far has been expected. What's important is that we are seeing growth. It's small, but it's consistent, and that's what's important. Because all it takes is consistency, being present, being consistent with your content and your goals and your mission statements and all that kind of stuff. And eventually something will blow up and will really start that upslope of things. What's important is that you're providing a place to follow up with something that blows up, and you're providing a path for people to stick with you. Mm-hmm. You know, we're talking about viral content or something that like is a big break for somebody that you can have that. It's like, for instance, take someone who wins the lottery, right? You win the lottery, huge break in life. You now just came into a massive amount of wealth with very little effort. Congratulations. However, there is like crazy amount of let's say half the amount of people that win the lottery lose all of it within the next few years. Mm-hmm. That's crazy. And the people who actually change their lifestyle are the ones who invest that money, who are smart with that money, put places that are responsible, and actually think about longevity. You know, if you come into that money and just think that, wow, this is the best, I can do no wrong, I can put money into whatever I want, you're wrong. You're not taking that breakthrough that you just got responsibly, and you're going to lose it all. Mm-hmm. So the way that I look at it is that no matter, like, before and after this breaking point, right? You stick around long enough, you're going to have that breaking point. It's only a matter of time. But what's important is that you've led up to that point in the most foundational way possible, and prepare yourself for when you hit that. Because when you hit that, not only do you have to maintain everything you do, but you have to figure out where you're going from here. Mm. You know, you have to have a plan. You have to know what's the long term, what's the end goal here, you know, and you have to be prepared for that before it even happens. So I'm not worried about the fact that we're not huge right now. I'm not worried about the fact that we don't have a crazy amount of money coming in right now. I like the fact that we're seeing, you know, some consistent growth. I like the fact that we're seeing some money, you know, better than no money. Mm. You know, when we started, we had no listeners. We had no money coming in. It was just an idea. And now we have constant listeners. We have money coming in, and our team is growing as people that are getting involved. And that's really encouraging to me. It's like, you got to focus on the small things and those foundational things. You look at a building, you got a concrete base, you got all the pipes, all that stuff. Very boring when it comes to it. In fact, you never see that again. When you see the building, you just see the huge skyscraper and all the cool glass and stuff that's on top of it. But you never once see that foundation again. Mm. But if that foundation was crap, then you're never going to see that building. So yeah. It's just going to fall apart, you know? So it can't be undervalued, this process of starting with so little stuff to show for it, you know? You have to change your mindset. You have to say, look at all the stuff we've done. look at our goals. Is it a goal worth fighting for? Yes, that's important. Are we seeing people who like the idea? Yes, cool, that's good. You just got to keep pushing, you know? I'm not expecting this to be an easy 6-month success. I've been doing this for 2 years now. I wouldn't be surprised if our first breakthrough doesn't come until another 3 years from now, you know? So, and I'm not, there's not like, even if this always is a small thing, I'm okay with that. If we have our own little niche community of like, say, a few thousand people, I'm okay with that. You know, this doesn't have to be the biggest thing in the world. You know, a lot of people want to be the biggest thing in the world or something that changes the world. That's really cool. But I think that too many people are not content with having their own small portion of their contribution in the world. Yeah.
So you'd rather do it and have it be out there and be moderately successful
than to not have it out there at all.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right on.
I think what's interesting is that I've seen a lot of stories developing recently. Like, I don't know if you heard Sugar Pine 7, a YouTube channel that was built and then got acquired by Rooster Teeth. They became really big. They actually won YouTube channel of the year, like the streamers or whatever one year. They were very successful, arguably went to one of the highest points that they could achieve as their group. And then just recently, they weren't performing as well. They were getting burned out. The main member said that he was burned out. Burnout actually has now been officially labeled as an actual medical term now. We're now at that. You know how like a few years ago we said that, you know, video game addiction is a real thing now. That's like burnout is now a real thing. It's being popularized by our internet, but that's a very regular day thing. People can get burnout by works, and this is why we have breaks, we have vacations. It's very important.
Yeah. And internet content creators are famous for not taking breaks ever.
Exactly. Yeah, because you got to push and push and push and push for it. And they had all these expectations and they had all this success and they had to follow it up and they didn't maintain it properly, and eventually all came crashing down. They ended up getting let go by Rooster Teeth, going back from employees to just partner programs with them. And the owner looked at it as a good time to kind of just, you know what, I think this is where it ends. And now they're kind of just splitting up on good terms, but the main creator is, for the time being, not looking to go on do YouTube creation at all. They say they might stick with the podcast and that's it. But now you got the other creators going into other avenues and maybe starting their own YouTube channel. But it's crazy to see someone who had goals, that did everything, they went to is high up and rewarded for it, acknowledged for it. They had their great community, and it still came down at the end. So it's success is not everything, you know, and success can be different and manifested different from person to person. You know, for me, success is, you know, doing something that changed somebody, even if it's one person. That's success to me. You know, people want to see it as, it's only success if we're known by every other person in the world, you know? But for me, that's a really lofty goal that not even 0.1% of people hit, you know? Sure, it'd be cool to be that one, like 0.1% of people, but that's unrealistic. You know, if you're not content with the small successes, you will never be content with the big successes, you know? So yeah, I think that it's very important that I'm totally content with where we are now, where we could be in 5 years. And just the overall mission. Because the thing is that if this mission to me is very important, then it should apply to one people as it does to 1 million people. There should be a difference. So,
right. Do you feel like, because I've been on the podcast a number of times. People I know have been on the podcast. Do you feel like you have everyone else? Do you feel like everyone that you have helping you is like fully on board? Like, do you feel like they get it?
Yeah.
Do you feel like they're consistent? I've
had one of my friends admit to me that we are totally on board, but they acknowledge that I'm the driver in this. So I think like this is a cause that they want to fight for, but it's something that, and I'm trying to figure out how to say this without making myself seem as like egotistical or something like that. But they saying like, you're the one who is making this happen.
Right.
When it comes to the overall vision, this is your passion. My passion is people and making them better. And I also like this community of people, and I'm doing both of those in tandem, involving people in this community that I find great, and beneficial. And they agree with that. Would they choose that to be their life mission? Mm-hmm. Probably not, but they're more than happy to contribute and make that a part of their life. Not everybody's going to have the same life mission. And that's fine. This is something that means a lot more to me than probably a lot of other people, and most people for that matter. But say you got someone who wants to go to Mars. They see that as their life goal, and they make that really important. And you got like people are like, that's really cool. I want to be a part of that. But if like that spearheaded person like decided, no, I'm just not going to make it happen anymore. It's like, oh, that's like kind of like a bummer. And it's like, yeah, I would like to see that happen. And I would want to contribute and make that a possibility. But without that person, it's kind of like, it's less impactful.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not trying to make myself seem as some like elevated person or anything. I don't know how else to express this other than the fact that this is something that I'm driving, and this is my life's mission. And I haven't met someone who is like co-creator level, basically. That would be cool down the road if I find someone who matches that exact hardcore life like goal. Mm-hmm. But so far, everyone involved is someone who is very interested in that and wants to contribute, but by no means would take my place,
right.
And switch roles to where I was a contributor and they were the main person driving,
Would you keep doing it if you didn't have anyone else around to help you with it?
That's a good question. I think it would be different.
Yeah. It's difficult to do a one-person podcast.
Yeah, well, I think that the way that I see this is that I want to make a company and a community because that's how I see myself reaching more people than I could ever do just in person to person. Mm. I am content with a one-person basis of living my life how I would want to see other people live theirs. That's the baseline thing. But I care about these specific issues more than what my reach allows. Mm. So when it comes to things like being like involved with a lot of people and having a lot of followers or whatever, it's not about that power or whatever money that comes with that. It's the fact that I can now help more people. I have more people that know about us, more people that I can reach to, and more people that I can influence for the better. And I think influence is kind of a weird term. I don't want to say that I'm trying to change, like, direct people. I want to be there for them, support them.
Right.
I'd rather be declared as some sort of supporter, is like when questions about, or it's like something that you need like support. I don't know. Like this influencer, I feel like it's kind of like a downward motion kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Like you're dictating. They're not a dictatorship, but like you're dictating. Like this is how you should do this. Where I want to emphasize that I want to build a community and not like a leadership kind of directional thing. Because I'm doing this as not as someone who thinks that I've got everything figured out. I definitely don't. I don't have the answers to everything. I don't think that I'm living life 100% correct. I'm living it to my best understanding, but I do not for 1 second think that I'm living everything perfectly. Mm-hmm. I think that's a very flawed way to live. If at any point you think that you're perfect or even close to perfect, I think you're very flawed. I only see the amount of room I have to grow and improve. Anything that I can offer for advice is just the stuff that I've learned along the way. Mm-hmm. I think being the best version of yourself is something that may never be achieved. Whatever vision that you have, like if you want to be like this, whatever version of perfect that you have, I think it's wise to look at something that you'll never reach, but it's something that you're always chasing. Mm-hmm. And that's how it's supposed to be. I think that you're always supposed to be improving. You're always supposed to be evolving. You should never be the same person your entire life, Yeah.
And you should have an ultimate ideal, but you should also set manageable milestones in between.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like, I try not to be too hard on myself. I try to be content with where I am. I don't think that's, like, I haven't done anything with my life, all these things. I do a lot of stuff because I want to speed up that process as much as I can. I want to get as close to that point as I can. I realize I'm like telling myself a lie in the way of like encouraging myself more. You know, it's like, I want to reach that level of perfect, even though I never will hit that level of perfect, but I want to get as damn close as I can. You know, like that's the goal. And I realized that, I'm far from it. You know, like, sure, I could talk about all the things that I have done to improve myself along that way, but I'd rather not look back about my accomplishments, and I would rather look at all the goals that I have yet to accomplish, you know? And so when I'm doing all this, I don't want to bring myself up as someone that deserves to be followed. I want my ideas to be more important. I want the things that I think are important to be what's worth following, not me as a person, you know?
So putting forward an ideal into the world that you think is of value to somebody else.
I don't want to be, how do I put it? I don't want to be congratulated for applying that life ideals or morality or whatever you want to establish it as. I just want to be someone who conveyed it in a way that they now understand it. If I was the person who explained something to you in the first time that made sense to you and now may change for yourself for the better, congratulations. But that's not my trophy to gain. That's yours for now making that change. You know, like, I would rather congratulate you than congratulate myself for that. You know, I don't seek fame in any of this. I seek to make people better, you know, and I want to congratulate them when they have improved as a person, you know, and that's all I care about.
All right. Well, we're at about an hour and 20 minutes. Anything you'd like to sign off with? You want to just plug?
Yeah. Well, if you like listening to Gordon, he's on our podcast on Inconceivable. Definitely listen to those on the ones that he's talked about. What was the one that you actually drove the conversation for recently?
I think it was the state of the Star Wars fandom.
Yes. Yeah, that was a great episode.
I forget what we called it. But that's basically the gist of it.
We had Alex on there as well, and he was on the first episode of this podcast. So if you want to hear another familiar voice, definitely check out that episode. But listen to Inconceivable. Listen to Coscast if you like cosplaying or like knowing about it. We actually have an episode coming out really soon or already out, depending on when you're listening to this, about getting into cosplay. So if cosplay is something that you've considered, we have an episode now tailored for educating you on the basics of cosplay and getting into it. So that'll be great to hear. And then also make sure to check out our website at geekkind.tv, where you can kind of see just everything as a whole. A great place to just see all of our content, and where to go for all of our other shows and places to follow and just updates in general.
All right. Well, thanks for doing this, man.
Thanks for having me. This is great. Right. Now I don't have to do anything. This is now your job to edit and put out, and I can just leave.
I will take on that responsibility. All right. Take it easy, folks.